If you're thinking to buy in Spain, avoid these 5 very common mistakes and you can save yourself a lot of time, energy, money, but most importantly, a hell of a lot of stress. So stick around until the end because I'm going to tell you some mistakes that even the most common and most veteran buyers overlook. So in this video, we're going to be talking about the common mistakes that actually foreign buyers and also national buyers make when they're buying a property in Spain. And it's actually incredible because I see case after case of people making these mistakes and it's quite straightforward. So just for those of you that don't know me, my name is Kian Bennani. I'm the founder of HiHomes and I've been in real estate since I'm 18 years old. That's practically 14 years in business in Costa del Sol with hundreds of clients helped by HiHomes and hundreds of transactions. I know a thing or two about buying property in Spain. So let's talk about the top common mistakes that happen in Spain. Mistake number 1, relying heavily on portals. Actually, what I mean by portals is in the case of Spain, is Idealista and Fotocasa. So for those of you which are used to, purchasing in your own country, for example, in Holland, where you have Funda, or in Belgium, in the UK, where you have Rightmove and all these different portals, where they're very, very, very much updated. Now, let me break it to you. Idealista, Fotocasa, Mil Anuncios, they are they're a very unreliable source of information. So we get buyers come to us, sending us a list of options on Idealista, and we sort of hate to break it to them, but a lot of the things you find on Idealista are very, very old. So what tends to happen is, people that come to the Spanish property market or people which are exploring, you might not even be speaking to a local specialist, but you might be creating a short list of properties on these portals where, sometimes, no kidding, maybe 50 or 65% of them are outdated or they simply don't exist. Why does this happen? It happens, we've covered this in other videos, but unfortunately, or fortunately for some, the Spanish real estate market is quite unregulated when it comes to real estate agents. So you get a lot of agencies advertising what we call hook adverts or lead magnets. That means that they're just behind you clicking, on that advertising in order to get your contact details. And then when you get in touch with them, it will be, oh yeah, I'm really sorry, but this property sold, or this property, is no longer available. But Mr. Client, I have these as well. And that's the whole sort of nature of these adverts. Not all of them. There are a lot of, good adverts on Idealista, but there is a very, very strong they're very weighted towards outdated or old information. So be aware of that. We come across it all the time. So that's my tip number 1. Use Idealista, but just contrast the information with local experts or local specialists on that specific area to make sure that the information you're looking at is correct. Share those listings with those local agents and say, hey, although this is not your listing, yes, in Spain you can do that. Although this is not your listing, is it still available and is this accurate? Okay, or is this a real ad? Okay, and goes without saying, if you do see a fake ad, report it, because these adverts will be taken down from Idealista, and ultimately that's what we all want, a more healthy ecosystem for our ads. Mistake number 2 is not paying attention to additional cost, and this is super, super common. So in Spain, when you see properties advertised, that's essentially the price you pay, the vendor, okay? But on top of these prices, you will also have to account for VAT or ITP. VAT is IVA in Spain, is value-added tax. It's a tax you pay on new construction. And in the case of a transfer of a resale property, which is privately owned, you're going to be paying ITP. Impuestos de transmisiones patrimoniales. That's a mouthful. However, this tax varies comunidad autónoma to comunidad autónoma. That means that every autonomous community in Spain has a different rate. In Andalusia, where we are, in Malaga, we pay 7%. In Baleares, Valencia, Murcia, you have different rates, so check those out. There's nothing more frustrating than, falling in love with a property, not doing your homework, and at the end of it, realizing that you have a lot more down payment or a lot more, let's say, cash needed in order to secure that property, right? But these additional costs are not only taxes. There are other costs such as land registry, notaries, surveying costs, mortgage setup costs, and if you need someone to look through the paperwork to just make sure everything's in order, such as a lawyer, which we always recommend at HiHomes, is around 1% of the purchase price. So in our autonomous community in Malaga, in our municipality and our province, our costs for resale properties are up to 9-10% for resale properties, and for new constructions up to 13.2%. Now let's just put that in perspective. If you're heading over to Spain with a budget of 500,000 euros and you've been looking on the Idealista and you've contacted a few agencies and you have a short list of properties you're going to be looking at. Okay, you come to ground, boots on ground, walk around, view these properties, and you fall in love with an apartment with panoramic sea views, paint the picture. If that property is priced at 500,000 euros, yeah, your purchase cost on average, depending if it's resale or new construction, let's just call it 10%. That means that it's not 500, it's actually 550,000 euros. And there's nothing more frustrating for a buyer to find out that his total budget does not actually cover the total investment needed in order to purchase that property. And it happens all the time. So, and in the case of mortgage buyers, that's even more frustrating. So in Spain, Spanish banks will lend you over the purchase price, not over the lending price, or not over the purchase cost, sorry. So that means that if a property is 500,000 euros and you've got a 70% mortgage, you're going to need a down payment of 30% plus the purchase cost. So know your maths before you enter the market. Know the additional costs. That is how to solve mistake number 2. Now time for mistake number 3. Not doing enough research or not looking into a property enough. Walking into a perfect property that ticks all the boxes, that has a perfect view, is very much like going on a first date with the love of your life. You have those butterflies feeling in your stomach, but it's very important to separate emotion from the actual property and do your research. Ask the right questions when you're on the viewing. What I mean by that is try to understand all the history of the property, the maintenance done, who's owned the property for how long, how they've, so get a feel of how they've treated the property. Have they always done the maintenance? Have they kept the property up to sort of the level it needs to be in? If in the case of apartments, make sure you look into sort of how the community looks like. Make sure you look into sort of how much the property running costs are. When we talk about research, we talk about knowing the ins and outs of a property. There's nothing worse than, buyers moving into a property and then finding out that their community fee is, higher than they expected. They had, assumed that the community fee would be reasonable, but they're, paying 300-400 euros more than they like on a community fee that they had not done their research about. So do your research on all aspects of the property, from maintenance to running costs to community items, absolutely everything. Don't be afraid of asking questions. Take your time during viewings and walk up to the listing agent, the vendor, and ask them all the questions you need to know. Ask them about how the property's been maintained over the last years, big reparations that have happened, big works that have happened, maintenance costs. Talk about running costs. Do not be afraid of asking questions. That takes us to mistake number 4, overlooking the community. So for those of you that are interested in buying an apartment or a townhouse, any sort of property that belongs to a community or an association, it's not the same for some villas. Some villas are independent and you don't really have a community, but most of the apartments and townhouses, and even villas in some cases, belong to a community. And this is a super overlooked item when it comes to property shopping or property viewings, is asking information about the community. For example, what's allowed and what's not allowed. Are you, for example, I love barbecuing. I love to be on the terrace, on the weekend, putting a barbecue on and enjoying time with the family. Spain is all about outdoor areas. Put some burgers on and you get a letter under the door saying, don't do that again. That happens. There are bylaws in communities and you need to pay attention to them. What's not allowed? For example, some communities are super dog friendly. Having a dog in a private property is not, they can't limit that, but they can limit, for example, dog owners from walking their dogs in communal areas. But there are some communities which are very pro dogs and other communities which are very against dogs. So check these things out. Another very popular thing in communities, and that's why it's super important to look to do the research in them, is are short-term rentals allowed? What kind of rentals are allowed in the complex in this day and age in Costa del Sol? At least it's a super important question to be asked. A lot of people that we help buy property on the coast buy a property to use it and rent it out, and according to the latest Spanish legislation, if the communities do not allow rentals specifically, you're not going to be able to rent your property out short term, right? Also, When it comes to the research side of the community, ask for las minutas, the minutes of the last meetings. Look into what's being discussed and what are current issues the community are facing. Every year in Spain, every association of owners, every community has an AGM, and after the AGM, they produce these minutes. It's a perfect tip for you guys, so you can actually look through the minutes and see what all the neighbors are looking at, talking about, discussion points, and also the financials. What situation is the community in? Are they about to incur into massive costs, to repaint the building? And when you sign that title deed and you're the owner, you're hit, 3 months later with a €6,000 bill. Yes, that can happen, and it's super solvable. Just do your homework, do your research, look into the minutes of meeting, and easy. For those people that buy with a lawyer, normally law firms and lawyers do this during the due diligence. In case you're not buying with a lawyer, again, our recommendation to all our buyers is use a lawyer. Check the minutes, and you'll have a pretty good understanding of the community. Mistake number 5. And actually, while I'm speaking and we're doing this video live, there's 5 mistakes. I'm going to add another one. And actually, just talking about it now is number 5 is use a lawyer. Like, why not use a lawyer? I mean, the lawyers in Spain typically charge 1% when it comes to a property transaction to represent the buyer, to look through not only the debts and charges the property may have, also to look through community items, to look through the urbanistic side of things, to make sure that what you're buying is a clean, legal, and property in a perfect good condition. So I'm going to turn this video into 6 because this just came during the live recording of this video. Now let's move on to 6, and 6 is actually the last one, and the one that most people overlook, including myself, is not structuring offers properly. What does this mean? Okay, now let me put that into practical terms. Let's say your name is David. David, you're about to, you walk into a property and you see a €500,000 apartment you absolutely love, right? So your next step is to go, hey, Mr. Vendor, I want to buy your property. You'll negotiate a deal, you'll negotiate a price, and then you'll want to move on to sort of securing and committing the vendor to a contract. And that contract in first instance is normally a reservation contract, right? And you're rushed to get that signed because obviously you want to get the vendor to commit to sell to you and have the property off the market. During this moment, it's super important to structure the offer. So before you sign reservation, tell the vendor, obviously, not only what you want to pay, but how long you need to actually complete. This is number 1. If you need to, sell stocks, exit certain investments, and that may require time, make sure that you establish that timeline, from an early moment, from that offer, establish how long you need, and always add a buffer, okay? In the case you're buying with a mortgage, you need to buffer as much time as the bank recommends. Another super important thing to add to your structuring of your offer is add precautions. The precautions are subject to conditions in the reservation contract or in the offer. So it goes without saying that when we are submitting offers on behalf of our buyers, we always subject the offer to due diligence. That means that no matter what our offer is, if during the due diligence stage our buyer's lawyer finds something out that they don't like, our client is entitled to get that reservation payment back 100% without any sort of penalty, and will not have any sort of problem exiting the agreement. But there's many other subjects too that can be added. Let me give you an example. Subject to agreeing on inventory, subject to making sure rentals are allowed in the community, subject to a survey, subject to checking why the humidity in the corner is coming out. If there's maybe, a humidity in a corner of a property and it's not a big deal, but something inside of you is ringing that sort of alarm bell, spidey senses that you should check it out, make it sort of a subject to in the reservation contract. This is a very important part of structuring the offer. And it goes without saying that another important part of the offer should be structuring the inventory, or including the inventory as part of the offer or the agreement. So if a property is sold furnished, right, there's always certain items an owner is going to want to take with themselves that's personal. And we always get the most frustrating of situations as agencies when, a client or a vendor says, yeah, everything's included except personal items. It comes to the moment where they make the inventory and they've taken, a desk out of the inventory. And the buyer, yourself, you'll go, hey, why is that desk not included? And they go, yeah, that's personal. That's personal because my grandmother gave me that. And, it's super important for the family, and obviously that's not included. Well, it's not obvious unless it's in the inventory. So you can make an offer subject to receiving an inventory or subject to agreeing on inventory. Or, in the best case scenario, agree what's included before you even make the offer and make an inventory before you make the offer. But that's another very important part of structuring your offer. In case that you're, in the market with finance or you're buying with a mortgage, try to get a offer subject to mortgage. Now, this is just sort of practically explain that vendors in Spain are not very open to subject to mortgage because it gives you sort of a blank, get out of jail card to exit the reservation without any sort of, loss of reservation deposit. So it's not very common, but if you can get it agreed, why not? So that's it, guys. That's a wrap. Those are the mistakes that, we think you guys should have on your radar to avoid. Like always, we would love to hear your feedback. So if you've got any mistakes that you think I've missed, comment those below. We're really super active and engaged with our community. Also, add your feedback to these mistakes. And if you're new to this, space and you would like to stay posted with information on Spain, Spanish property, real estate market, and information on Costa del Sol, click that button, subscribe to the HiHomes YouTube channel, and press the bell to make sure that you're notified when videos just like these come out. Like always, guys, in property, in Spain, knowledge is your best investment. Until the next time, hasta luego.